Okay, so today's live is going to be quite a bit different than usual. I really pondered and prayed on whether or not to go live today, and I decided to do it. And I'm coming definitely different than usual. I'm just going to come from a place of transparency today. Um, I don't ever come live in a wrinkled t-shirt. Never actually seen really in a wrinkled t-shirt. But I'm just coming as just very much as I am in this moment today. Um, and I'm just going to just kind of share from my heart a little bit of my experience, and perhaps it will somehow be a blessing to someone else as well. So, a few hours ago, I gained a new ancestor. My grandmother, to who I've been very close, made her transition. Uh, a few hours ago. Honestly, I feel very sleepy. I don't apologize for that though. Um, I'm not going to have. I don't feel like having the ring light on, so the lighting is a little bit different than usual today. But yeah, so I'm very close to my grandmother for a long time. She was my last grandparent on this side, and now she's joined by other three grandparents in the realm of the ancestors. And I just want to kind of share with you all a little bit, kind of from my experience. And notice I didn't say that I lost a grandmother. I didn't lose her. I know where she is. Um, it's not a loss. I gained an ancestor. I gained an ancestor. I know that every one of us who's on this earth, we have a limited time in these bodies, right? Um, and we don't tend to be in a hurry to leave them. We don't tend to be in a hurry for our loved ones to leave them. Um, and we tend to call when somebody leaves their earth suit. That's what I'm calling this stuff. When somebody leaves that behind, we tend to call it that they died. I don't really believe in death. No, I don't really believe in death. I do believe that we lay our bodies down. Some of the profound wisdom that came forth in this 1994 movie from Disney called The Lion King. The movie started off with this song called The Circle of Life. And there was a point where Mufasa was talking about the circle of life, explaining it to his son Simba, who would eventually become the head of the pride, the king of Pride Rock. And he was explaining to Simba that all of life is connected, that we're all connected, and we have to respect all of life, you know, including the antelope. And Simba was like, "But Dad, don't we eat the antelope?" And hello, Karen. And Mufasa said, yes, we eat the antelope. And the antelope eat the grass, and we die when we return to the soil, that we become the soil that the grass ends up growing out of. So it's all connected in the circle of life. And so I used to say that the body dies. The spirit lives, but the body dies. But really, even the body doesn't die because it's necessary for continued growth of life. The decomposition of plants and animals actually nourishes and gives life to the soil. So even the body doesn't die. We just kind of do a different thing. I speak names of my ancestors every day. And today I spoke a new name, and that was the name of Jacquees Althea Hall, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. And her body had become pretty frail. I'm 50 years old and had grandmother still sucking wind. What a blessing. What a blessing. A lot of folks, most folks can't say that they still can sit physically and have a conversation in their 50s with a grandparent who's still on earth sucking wind. But I'm very blessed that I got to do that. Very blessed that I got to do that, and very thankful. And I know that a lot of people experience the transition of their loved ones. And I say transition of their loved ones because they transition from this place to another. A way that I sometimes say it is they move, just change their address from the physical to the non-physical. And, like with my grandmother, is like this past week, hey, cousin, sending a bunch of peace and love to you. My grandmother this week, she was like between two worlds. She was like kind of between two worlds. There were times that she was talking to folks who've gone on, who aren't here anymore. And then there are times when she would kind of talk to us here. And there were times that, you'd see her face just light up, like with happiness, even though her body was running out of energy. And then there'd be moments where you could tell that she wasn't really all the way there. And then she would vacillate between these two worlds before she finally left this one a few hours ago. I want to say to anybody who's out there who's dealing with a loved one who is nearing the end of this expression of life, or anybody who is, hey, Reverend Shahira, I love and appreciate you. Anybody who's dealing with anybody who's in the process of making their transition, or who has made their transition, I want to say to you that life is such a beautiful and precious thing. And I hope that you'll each cherish it to the uttermost. It's a limited time that we have together here. And, there was a time that my grandmother was living, when I moved to Florida. I moved to Florida during the pandemic in the fall of 2020. And my grandmother was coming for a short time for my nephew's birthday. And she ended up having some challenges when she was here. And she ended up staying with me a little over a month. And, she slept in my bed. And I basically gave my room to her. And, there are times I actually thought that she might take her last breath in my bed. And I wondered what that was going to be like. It didn't end up happening. Oh gosh, I can't tell you how many times I thought that it was the end for my grandmother. Thank you, Dr. Sophia. Um, Over the last several years, um, my maternal grandmother, when she was 91, passed. And I had so much peace about it because I knew that there was nothing that was left unsaid between she and I. And so I had a definite and a beautiful peace about it. And the weekend, I eulogized my grandmother. And the weekend of her memorial service remains one of the most cherished memories of my lifetime because all of my family was there. My parents were divorced when I was in elementary school, but all of my father's side of the family were there. All of my mother's side of the family were there, including my grandparents, my grandfather, my mother's mother, and my mother's father, my mother's mother who just passed, my mother's father. In fact, the repast was of my paternal grandmother was the last time that I saw my maternal grandfather breathing. It's helping him get in the car, actually, leaving the repast that was at my baby sister Tatiana's house after my grandmother's memorial service. And 3 months later, my grandfather passed, and I was back in Detroit. I was living in Texas at the time. I traveled back to Detroit to eulogize my grandfather. It's a different experience when you're eulogizing a very close loved one, because you're ministering to the family, and also you're ministering as a part of the family. So that's a real interesting place to come from. And I was sitting next to my grandmother, and at my grandfather's homegoing, and it was interesting because I kept hearing my grandfather say different stuff at his homegoing, but I leaned over to my grandmother, and like I had her, I was with her, I was sitting next to her, I was walking with her the whole time and stuff, and I leaned over to her and I said, this was in 2015, the summer of 2015. And I leaned over to her and I said, now, Grandma, I was just here doing this 3 months ago for a grandparent. I don't want to be back here 3 months from now doing the same thing. And she assured me that she wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. Well, like I said, that was almost 7 years ago. And yeah, that was almost 7 years ago. And I got to have some really interesting conversations with my grandmother over those 7 years. Part of me choosing to move to Texas was to be able to have more time with my grandmother. And I didn't know that she'd be living with me at any point. And it wasn't for a long period of time. Kind of seemed like a long period of time at the moment, though, because in terms of compatibility, in terms of a living space, we weren't necessarily all that compatible. Yeah, the way that we eat is different, is night and day. Just the way we do a lot of things is just very, 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 very different. She at the time loved to have the news constantly on all the time, and that's just not my vibe at all, at all. But it was an honor being able to tend to her. Um, and um, when I moved to Florida, my sister and her family of six had just moved here 3 weeks before I did. They were staying with my mom and stepdad, and um, because it was COVID, they decided rather than try to sell their house in Michigan during COVID and having people in and out of the house, that it would be better to have people looking at the house while they were already gone. And and so they came and they lived with my mom and stepdad. Their family of six moved in with my mom and stepdad. And my grandmother came and she was ended up being with me. She was living in a condo on her own in the southern part of the state. And she came, you know, initially for a few days for my nephews, her great grandson's birthday, and ended up staying with me. Uh, and then my sister and her family found a place, and a lot of beautiful details connected with even them finding a place now. I won't go into all that stuff right now, but um, she ended up then going, you know, once they moved out, she ended up going and staying with my mom and stepdad. And there was something that my grandmother said to me as she was on the way out the door. You know, she hugged me and she said to me as she was on the way out the door to head to their place, she said, and I'll always cherish this. She said that I've really enjoyed getting to know you as a man, and I really respect the man that you are. And that, I can't tell you how much that meant to me. For a man, a way that a man needs to feel and experience love is in the form of respect. And for my grandmother to say that to me. My grandmother was the queen of the world. Something that my mother had mentioned to her during the time that she was actually staying with me. Uh, because she, you know, she kind of had a thing that it almost seemed like everybody else for a long time almost seemed like everybody else in the family was like part of her servants. So she was the queen and everybody else was part of the servants. Um, and my mom said to her, um, Mom, we all know that you're the queen. Uh, we just want to feel part of we want to feel part of the royal court too. But that was my grandmother, and you know, it was really cool though for her to share that, and um, you know, she had taken care of several people in her lifetime when they were, you know, at the end of their life, and she probably was a lot better. Not probably, it just it's her nature. She's a lot better with seniors than with children. Actually, that was just her vibe. Some people are really good with children. Some people are really good with the elderly, and her vibe was just that she was particularly good with the elderly. And there were several people that she had taken care of and in her lifetime, and then she ended up becoming the person to be taken care of. She was a very, very independent person. She Her name Jacquees Althea Hall. My grandfather called her Jack. She always had to be up on her feet, moving around, doing something. She didn't let too much grass grow under her feet. And where they would spend their time would be in their kitchen. They spent all their time at home for the most part in the kitchen. And that's where we would visit. We would visit in the kitchen and on 7 Mile Road in Detroit. And my grandfather, would say to her, they were married on Christmas Day, 1949, in my great grandparents' backyard. And when they when my grandfather passed, they had been married over 65 and a half years. And and my grandfather, he'd look at my grandmother, just constantly had to be doing something, you know. And like I said, he called her Jack, and he would say, "Jack, just sit down. You always got to be doing something. Just sit down, relax." Because my grandfather was definitely the polar opposite. My grandfather was not one to be always on his feet doing stuff. My grandfather was one to be sitting in his chair supervising people, telling everybody else what to do. Um, uh, yeah, but grandma came to a point where she obviously had to start kind of chilling out a little bit because her body just wasn't capable of being up doing all this stuff, uh, and she got to a point of uh, receiving, you know, the care, and other people having to do things. Now that doesn't mean that didn't have that supervisor thing in her too. She definitely did. If any time somebody was going to be going somewhere, she'd have some assignment to give them to do something, or something she'd have them pick up for her or something. Oh boy. But anyway, my brother and I, after my uncle passed, we kind of filled a void uh, in my grandfather and grandmother's lives, and um, uh, we would spend a lot of time there visiting, he and I. And yesterday, the last people in the family that she saw was my brother, my sister, and I. And we made a sibling trip to the hospital. I feel like she was waiting for my brother. He and his family traveled up from the southern part of the state yesterday. They were here last Saturday for my niece's birthday, and they traveled up again yesterday. And I feel like um, my grandmother was waiting on him, and so the three of us. They only allowed two people in the room at the time, so my sister and I went up, and then I walked her down and came up with my brother, uh, and her face just lit up when she saw him. Her face just lit up when she had no energy. She had no meat left on her bones. She was so small and tiny, um, but she lit up when she saw his face, and her voice was very faint. She was very weak, but I don't know exactly what the last words I heard my grandmother say, but the last words I remember her saying was, "I'm so happy. I'm so happy." Um, my mom had been there that day, her only remaining child, and her grandchildren were there to see her, the last ones to see her, and my brother and I were literally the last two to see her. And it was like so many times when he and I had gone to visit. A lot of times he and I would go and visit on our own, the two of us. And we'd show up at night, not even like early in the evening. And we'd be there sitting talking with them, with my grandmother and grandfather in the kitchen, even on a weeknight. Um, and a lot of times, they would stay up even though they were sleepy just to spend the time with us. And a lot of times, Grandpa he would be going to the bathroom, but from the bathroom he'd go to bed. He wouldn't say anything. Sometimes he would, but a lot of times he'd just end up going to bed. And so it would just be the three of us: my grandmother, my brother Damien, and I. would just be the three of us there, and talking and stuff, sitting in the kitchen talking, and that's who it was yesterday. It was my grandmother, my brother, and I just talking, and um, like I said, the last words I remember her saying is, "I'm so I'm so happy," and that will stay with me. She was in many ways just a shell of herself, coming towards the end. But she still had a lot of that spunk too. She was she was very feisty, and she still had some of that that spunk in her. Um, and for the most part, I wouldn't describe my grandmother as a light person. um, but at the end, she became very, very light, very, very light. And my mom said how, like my sister, she was the baby and the only girl, had two older brothers, quite a few years older than her, and and uh, they didn't think they'd be having any more children, and then they end up having my grandmother, and that was their baby girl, their baby and the only girl. That's a special spot in the family. That's a very special spot in the family, and she was that. And my mom mentioned this week about how she could see how her dad could be so enamored with her, because she got to see this past week. My mom got to see what my grandmother was like as a little girl. She went back to regress to that, how she was as a little girl, and she could see this adorableness in my grandmother, this cuteness in her, which is really a blessing to be able to see and to witness and to be able to experience. And there was no way that she was ever going to walk again. But like the day before my grandmother made her transition, I think it was the day before, maybe it was the day before that. My mom's best friend, who's really like a sister to her, she came into town. She had been in town for a few days, in fact, and but my mom wanted to spend some time alone with her mother. Um, so they kind of went together, but a friend went to the mall, and my grandmother asked about where she went, and my mom explained to her that she went to the mall, and she said, "Oh, I wish I had known she was going. I would have had her pick me up some beige shoes." So my grandmother. Oh boy, that was so her. Ah, I love my grandmother. I don't say love because it's current, it's present, and she's still here. She's still alive. She's not dwelling in the earth plane, so to speak. But I'm very clear that she will still very much have an impact in the earth plane. There are some stories that I could share that are known within the family that we've discussed recently. I won't get into a lot of those details, and I won't be on too much longer today. Um, but I know that there'll be things that you'll be doing on our behalf from the other side of the veil, uh, as is the case that we experienced with my grandfather when he passed. My aunt, my father's sister, after my grandfather, my paternal grandfather passed, who was the first grandparent that passed. This one would be the last. She would meet with my grandfather after he passed. She would, like, in meditation or in dream state, she would meet with my grandfather, be on this park bench. And, uh, he told her, there's more I can do you. There's more at this point, there's more I can do for you from this side than I could from the other side. And he'd always tell her she has to go back. She can't go where he is. But, we very much have that sense, regarding the grandparents that have passed subsequently. And I want to say to you, and I want to encourage you to honor your ancestors, honor those who've gone before you. None of us would be here if it were not for them. And some of us have parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, great grandparents that we didn't know, that we never knew, but still honor them. If you know their names, speak their names. Some may have had ancestors that were unkind, but speak their names as much as possible. Come to peace with them. Speak their name. If it was not for them, there would be no you. Honor their memory. Hopefully one day there'll be people who will speak your name and honor your memory. Yeah. Brenda Can, I just saw your message, and I see that there have been a lot of messages. I haven't seen all of them. Excuse me for not responding to the comments. I usually do like to respond to the comments, but I just happened to see this one. Brenda Can, church member, same church as my grandmother. She said, take it from one who knows your grandmother had at least 10 pairs of beige shoes. Yes, I know. There was not anything that my grandmother wanted for. Anything. She traveled the world. She was surrounded by people who loved her, had rich relationships with family members and friends. She definitely didn't lack for anything materially, not by any stretch. Oh boy. Yeah, like even the last week in the hospital, she was like asking about her jewelry and stuff. She wanted to wear her jewelry. Not a good idea. Shoot, stuff can disappear in the hospital. So please don't wear your nice jewelry to the hospital or have your loved ones wearing nice jewelry in the hospital. My grandmother's expensive glasses disappeared from one hospital, and her phone disappeared from a hospital. All kind of stuff could happen. Not saying anybody necessarily stole it. Some that could have happened, or stuff could have just been easily misplaced or something. But whatever way it goes, just kind of be mindful of that. I appreciate all of your comments, Carson, Azaefe, Brenda, Layla, Reverend Shahira, Dr. Sophia, Reverend Shirley. Reverend Shirley, I need to reach out to you. I need to see about reconciling a scheduling conflict, actually. Curly Conscious King. Karen, I appreciate you all. I really prayed on whether I was going to do a live today because when I go live, I have to be on, Anybody who broadcasts live, you know what I mean. usually I've got this ring light staring me in the face that's blinding me, and I want to make sure that my energy is up and everything. I really prayed on whether to go live today or not. Because I only have a certain amount of energy. I like in the middle of the night, in the wee hours of the morning, I had like this choking sensation, and uh, which woke me up. And I immediately thought about my grandmother, understanding what was going on with her, and immediately wondered if that was connected with her and her transition. She had passed, um, and so I immediately thought to check my phone to see if my mother had called, and she had. And so I called her at that point. But hello, mother dear. I love you. Anyway, my energy has not been the highest today. Which is why I'm resting my head on my face on my hand right now, even. And don't have the light on. And you don't see the exuberant version of myself that you see a lot of the times. But like I said, I really prayed on uh, whether I'd go live today or not. I didn't want to do so out of obligation. And I know that I only have so much energy to expend. And I want to be mindful of where I'm expending it. And I know that I'm going to be being with my mom today. Uh, and I'm honoring where I am, where I authentically am as well, not feeling the need to put on a happy face per se. Uh, Not that I'm feeling depressed or anything. I'm not feeling that. I do feel a combination of peace and sadness. A lot of expected feelings, I'm sure. But I got the unction to just come on for a little bit and just share, not what I planned on talking about, but just share from where I authentically am, and the possibility that somebody else might get a blessing from it as well. And so I hope that you have. Um, but as always, I'm praying for a bunch of peace and love for you all, and all of you all who've sent your kind words. I certainly appreciate that. Um, I certainly appreciate that, and I feel like I can say that on the behalf of my family as a whole. I mainly want a bunch of love to be sent my mom's way. So you all send my mom a bunch of love. Yeah, it's interesting when you um, when a lady when a lady's mom passes. It- the most interesting relationship in a family dynamic, I feel like, is the mother-daughter relationship. Um, the most challenging, probably, um, the most stimulating, the one that there's no other relationship like that that has that intensity. I'll say, um, yeah, there's something profound about that. Uh, and this is 1 week before Mother's Day. Uh, So yeah, so you all send my mom a bunch of love. I'm sure she could. I know that she can use it, and uh, even love in advance of next Sunday. Uh, I'm sure that would be an interesting experience for her. I love you, Ma, and I appreciate all of you who've been here and kind of hung out with me today. I'll go back and review the messages. Uh, but know that they're received. I'm receiving them in the spirit that they're sent. And I just pray God's richest, most bountiful blessings on all of you. I encourage you as much as possible to make peace with the folks in your lives. Um, At the end of the day, it's not gonna matter how many hours you worked. Nobody leaves here regretting that they didn't spend more hours working on their job. You know, the thing that makes life meaningful is the relationships that we have. And so I encourage all of you to do your best to make the best of your relationships, your family relationships, your relationships, just with people, period. Um, that is a profound pathway to peace. Even if some of the relationships you need to distance yourself from certain people and establish some healthy boundaries, tend to some self care in some areas. Yeah. Well, that's about all I have to say today. I'm not going to try to force myself to say anything more than that. Hey, cousin Pat, God bless you. I love you all, and I'll look forward to catching you next time.